Please excuse me, but it seems my car is having some trouble. I received a notification advising me to clear my outstanding balance promptly to avoid my card being deactivated. The customer service representative mentioned that the payment for my usual credit card hasn't been processed yet. I thought I had sufficient funds set aside in an account for automatic payments, but when I checked my bank balance, it shockingly read $2. The only other person who has access to withdraw from this account is my husband. Feeling a rush of urgency, I quickly grabbed my phone to report the situation to the police. My name is Shirley, I'm 29 years old, and I work as a web designer. I enjoy the flexibility my job offers, allowing me to set my schedule. Although I have the option to meet clients virtually, I prefer face-to-face meetings as they help me better communicate my ideas. As project deadlines approach, I often find myself working tirelessly, sacrificing sleep to ensure productivity. My ability to maintain this intense pace is greatly supported by my husband Matthew, whom I married a year ago. We first met a couple of years back when I was working on a project for his company where he served as the liaison. After dating for 2 years, we got married and he moved into my apartment. However, a significant concern has recently arisen involving Matthew's parents. They are quite relaxed about their finances and often run into money troubles. Matthew and I share our living costs equally. Due to my higher income, I pay all our bills at the beginning of the month, and he pays me back his half at the start of the next. This arrangement usually works well for us, but the current financial predicament has added unexpected stress. When I brought up this month's expenses to Matthew as I normally do, he seemed unusually irritated and said, "Look, money's a bit tight right now. Can I settle my share of the expenses after my next paycheck?" Confused, I asked, "What do you mean by tight? I'm only asking for half of the expenses." He replied, "I get that, but I'm completely strapped until my next payday." I was taken aback because it had only been 8 days since his last paycheck. His vague responses and reluctance to explain were frustrating me. I pressed on, "Can you please explain why you're unable to pay? And what's this about helping your parents?" Matthew hesitated, then said, "It's nothing suspicious. I just helped my mom and dad out. They mentioned they were having some financial trouble, so I sent them some money." This was surprising to hear. Matthew's parents were supposed to be financially stable. His father worked full-time and his mother part-time. I couldn't understand why they suddenly needed money. "Why do your parents need financial support if they're both working? This hasn't been an issue before." Matthew admitted, "I've been helping them for a while. They asked for more money starting this month, and I agreed." Although I understood the importance of supporting family, this revelation was unsettling. I firmly said, "All right, just make sure you pay your share by the end of the month." Matthew has always been stubborn, and once he decides something, he rarely changes his mind. While I love him for who he is, this trait sometimes creates difficulties. Knowing that pushing him further wouldn't help, I chose to drop the issue and patiently wait for his next payday. Since that conversation, however, he has consistently found excuses to avoid contributing to our household expenses. This pattern has added a layer of tension to our relationship, making financial discussions more challenging than they used to be. When Matthew does contribute financially, it's just a fraction of what we need. It's been nearly 8 months of him not pulling his weight, and while we are technically still married, my patience is growing thin. I'm left to handle all the bills and household chores alone. Reflecting on this makes me feel both foolish and overwhelmed, hollowed out by the relentless strain. One late evening, Matthew came home, his cheeks flushed from alcohol, and I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. I raised my voice, "Why didn't you call if you were going to be out drinking? I made dinner and waited for you." His reply was casual. "Sorry, a colleague invited me out unexpectedly." I countered, "Couldn't you have sent a message? I've asked you before to keep me informed. It's not fair to leave me hanging." "Don't start yelling the moment I walk in. It's not welcoming," he retorted. I was stunned. "What do you mean? Why am I the one being blamed?" His look of disdain was like a slap in the face, intensifying my anger. I confronted him directly. How can you afford to go out drinking when you can't even contribute to our bills? I'm exhausted too from working every day and handling all the household chores. If you can't contribute financially, can we at least stop sending money to your parents? I suggested. Matthew bristled. What? Why? That's my family's business. It's not your concern. This response stung. And what about us, Matthew? Aren't we family too? What am I to you? We're living here together, married. This is so frustrating. What does it matter? You earn more than I do anyway, he said dismissively, as if that justified his lack of contribution. His sense of entitlement infuriated me further. The only reason Matthew can live so comfortably is that I've been shouldering our financial responsibilities alone, but his recent behavior and attitudes have made me question how sustainable our situation is. As I've been covering all our expenses, I couldn't help but think, would a simple thank you or an apology for the inconvenience be too much to ask? His irrational arguments left me utterly speechless. His arrogance was bewildering. With our tempers flaring, I realized a rational conversation was out of the question at that moment, so I suggested we revisit the discussion the next day. The following day, as I was preparing dinner and waiting for Matthew to return, I heard the front door creak open. "Welcome home," I called out, but received no reply. Then the living room door swung open, and to my surprise, there stood my husband with his parents. "Mom, Dad, what brings you here?" I asked, taken aback. With a smug grin, Matthew said, "My parents have something they want to discuss with you. Let's get to the point," he prompted, urging them to speak. My father-in-law, looking somewhat apologetic, started, "Apologies for the sudden visit. We've come to talk about the financial support Matthew has been providing us." "What's this about?" I asked, confused. "Oh, Shirley, could you please ease up on Matthew?" his mother interjected, catching me completely off guard. "Matthew has been sending us money each month considering our well-being. It's unfair for you to accuse him," she added. "What are you saying? I'm just asking for our living expenses to be managed properly," I replied, trying to contain my frustration. "Listen, Shirley," his father chimed in, "I hate to bring this up, but we're practically family, aren't we? If your own family were struggling, wouldn't you lend a hand?" "That's what anyone would expect, right?" his mother continued. "Your father-in-law and I have been experiencing financial strain lately, so we rely on Matthew to continue supporting us. Therefore, you should handle all the living expenses for both of you." This presumption was staggering. The idea that I should carry the entire financial burden for us felt incredibly unfair. Matthew's parents imposing on our finances without considering the strain it put on our marriage was troubling. I realized this was not just about money. It was about respect and boundaries within our family dynamics. They assumed it was only natural for me to cover all the costs. Unable to bear it any longer, I finally snapped, "Enough is enough. What do you think I've been doing? I manage all the household chores and cover every single expense. How is that fair? Isn't it what married couples are supposed to do? Support each other? Or are you just that selfish?" Upon hearing his mother's scoff, my husband, who was sitting beside me, couldn't hold back a chuckle. That evening, despite my attempts to bring reason into our conversation, they remained stubborn and left well after 10 p.m. Once they were gone, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. My husband coldly handed me signed divorce papers. Shocked, I asked, "What's this?" "It means exactly what it says," he replied sharply. Looking down at me, he added, "If you persist in defying me, I'll end our marriage." "Are you serious?" I asked, incredulous. "Absolutely. If you don't want a divorce, then simply obey. Your role is to follow, not lead." I knew I should have stood my ground, but I felt utterly drained. Perhaps trying to reason with Matthew before things got worse was futile. Maybe divorce was the inevitable solution. The decision came swiftly. The next day, I signed the divorce papers Matthew had given me and headed to City Hall. The documents were processed quickly, and just like that, I was single again. Now, free from the constraints of my marriage, I felt a surge of relief and empowerment. I decided it was time to find my place and embrace independent living fully. Feeling rejuvenated, I indulged in a shopping trip to the department store. Working predominantly from home and with outings limited mainly to client meetings, it had been quite some time since I splurged on myself, especially given the recent financial strain. Today was a new beginning. Determined to treat myself, I headed to the women's clothing section, and after trying on a few dresses, I chose 2 favorites. At the checkout, I handed over my credit card, but the cashier's troubled expression made my heart sink. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It seems we're unable to process this card." "What? That's impossible," I replied, puzzled. "I just used it recently to buy a new tablet for work without any issues. Why the sudden problem now?" Rushing home, I immediately called the card company. After explaining the situation, the operator shared some alarming news. "We require immediate payment of the outstanding balance, or your card will be rendered unusable." Outstanding balance? Last month we were unable to debit your card usage from your account. Could you please verify your bank account balance? Ending the call, I quickly logged into my bank account online, the very account that funds my card transactions, which was initially reserved for personal savings. If my memory served me right, there should have been $8 million in there, but the balance read 0. Just before the card's due date, the entire $8 million had been withdrawn. What on earth was happening? A chilling suspicion gripped me. Could it have been Matthew? But who else had access? Our bank book and ATM card were stored together, only accessible to both of us, meaning Matthew was the only other person who could have withdrawn from my account. When he returned, I confronted him. "Hey, did you withdraw money from my account?" He smirked, let out an exasperated sigh, and replied, clearly irritated, "Oh, you figured it out, huh? Thought I did a pretty good job of covering my tracks." "I can't believe this. Why would you do that?" "For my parents, of course. I gave them your $8 million. "What did you just say?" His words hit me like a ton of bricks. He had given away my entire savings to his parents under the guise of needing financial support. Despite my shock, I managed to maintain composure as Matthew began his explanation, his voice laced with a misguided sense of pride. His parents, it turned out, had fallen prey to the lure of online shopping, their new hobby quickly escalating into an addiction. They weren't just buying necessities, they were splurging on luxuries, accumulating duplicates of expensive items, and even distributing them to neighbors as if hosting some extravagant giveaway. Their monthly expenditures had ballooned to a staggering $750,000, a figure well beyond Matthew's financial reach. Desperate, he had dipped into my savings, extracting a whopping $8 million to cover their excesses. When he finished, he casually remarked, "You shouldn't be upset. After all, they're practically your family too. Think of it as helping out the family. It's just $8 million. No need to make such a big deal out of it." That was the last straw. I dialed the police right then and there, my voice steady as I reported a theft. Matthew's eyes widened in disbelief as I ended the call. He erupted, "What are you doing? Did you just call the cops?" "Of course I did," I shot back. "We've just been robbed, haven't we?" He sputtered, "But this is exaggerating. It's my house, too." I cut him off, standing my ground. "Actually, we're divorced now, and this apartment, it's leased under my name only, so technically it's not your home anymore. We are not together, remember? Those divorce papers you signed yesterday, they've been filed, so this place, it's mine." As the tension escalated between us, Matthew still couldn't grasp the gravity of the situation. "You've got to be kidding me. Call them back and cancel the report," he pleaded in disbelief. I waved my phone menacingly at him and warned, "If you dare lay a finger on me, I'll call the cops again. Just so you know, they're already on their way. You can't escape now. Why don't you just admit what you've done?" Matthew, looking desperate, tried to evoke our past. "Wait, hold on. We loved each other, didn't we? How did it come to this?" "Love each other?" I scoffed, my voice thick with scorn. "Don't try to feed me that nonsense. Think about it. Whose fault do you think all of this is? It all began because you blindly supported your irresponsible parents. You can't just act recklessly and expect forgiveness. Who would forgive someone as despicable as you? Stung by my words, Matthew attempted to shift the focus. What a fool! Do you really know who you're talking to? Yes, I'm talking directly to you, I shot back, my voice cold and steady. Like parents, like a child. Because you were raised by parents who were careless with money, you think it's acceptable to deplete someone else's savings. I hope the police give you a stern lecture and make you feel the weight of those $8 million. Just then, we heard the sirens approach and the doorbell rang, a sharp sound that cut through the heated exchange. As the police entered, Matthew's bravado dissolved completely, and he crumbled, a shadow of his former self. "Who's the suspect?" an officer asked, looking between us. Pointing at Matthew, now a pathetic figure on the floor, I said firmly, "It's him, without a doubt." "All right, let's go. You need to come in for questioning," the officer commanded. Matthew, his face pale and eyes wide with fear, stammered, "All I wanted was to support my parents." His voice trailed off into silence as the reality of the situation hit him. Matthew was led away by the police and his protests were ignored. However, the saga didn't end there. Despite my clear statement and the evidence I provided, the authorities later informed me that the incident was considered a civil matter. They explained that the legal boundaries prevented them from taking more drastic actions in what was essentially a financial dispute within a marriage. Feeling frustrated yet determined, I realized that the police couldn't provide the resolution I sought. The next step was clear. I decided to seek legal assistance to address the betrayal and reclaim the substantial funds that had been taken from me. I needed a strategy not just for the immediate recovery of my assets, but to ensure that such a flagrant violation of trust and financial security could never happen again. As I moved forward, the path was fraught with legal complexities and emotional turmoil, but I was resolute. My journey to justice and financial independence was just beginning, and I was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I demanded compensation for the misappropriation of my $8 million savings, totaling $10 million in damages. Naturally, Matthew and his parents couldn't afford such a sum. In the end, they found themselves engulfed in debt. Despite their precarious financial situation, his parents continued their reckless spending, accumulating even more debt and eventually resorting to borrowing from loan sharks. They lived in constant fear of relentless debt collectors, always trying to stay out of sight. Contrary to their downward spiral, I made the bold decision to sever all ties with Matthew. I moved out and relocated to a new apartment, a fresh start that turned out to be the best decision for my peace of mind and career growth. Fortunately, my career began to thrive unexpectedly, and my income soon surpassed my wildest expectations. Since parting ways with Matthew, everything in my professional life seemed to fall perfectly into place. In hindsight, I regretted not divorcing him sooner. The failure of my marriage was a profound but valuable lesson. It taught me that my life was far from over and that I had the resilience to recover and rebuild. Taking lessons from this tumultuous experience, I resolved to exercise greater caution in my future endeavors, ensuring that my financial and emotional well-being was never compromised again. This period of my life, though fraught with challenges, underscored the importance of independence and the strength found in decisively moving forward from difficult situations.
"Why are you still scrubbing that door like it's your life's purpose?" my daughter-in-law snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. Before I could explain, she shoved me out the front door with surprising force, tossing my belongings after me. "You're useless. Go freeze in the yard, old woman," she yelled, slamming the door shut behind me. I stood there trembling, dressed in a thin, sweat-soaked shirt, as snowflakes began to fall around me. "Millie, please let me in. It's freezing," I begged, my voice shaking as much as my body. "Why don't you just leave?" she snapped. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of something far worse. My name is Ruth. I'm a 60-year-old housewife, and my husband got sick and passed away several years ago. My son Arlo, his wife Millie, and my grandson Austin now live with me. The unexpected death of my husband brought us together, but I felt like I was giving my son and his family enough space and not interfering with them. They thought that being too close would be suffocating for everyone. They did a lot of renovations to have as much privacy as possible. Millie is upbeat and social. She often socializes with a large group of friends. Maybe it was for the best that we rarely saw each other. Austin, my grandson, is in 4th grade. I occasionally look after Austin when Millie goes out. He is absolutely adorable. Arlo is busy with work, and works at night, so our schedules don't line up, and I barely speak with him. Arlo and Millie never fought and occasionally went out together, so to me it didn't seem like their marriage had any major problems. Millie had many friends, and hosted parties at our home frequently. She has kept in touch with her mom friends from Austin's kindergarten class, and they are all good friends. They would come over to our house once a week on Fridays and have a party. These parties always bothered me. They started in the evening and didn't end until late at night, with people drinking and being loud. Her friends' husbands would occasionally come over and get drunk too. They didn't care if Austin got sleepy or hungry, so Austin would often come to my room when he was bored. One time, an ambulance was called, because a drunken friend of hers slipped and fell into glass, getting covered in blood. Another time, a fight between couples became so heated that they were on the verge of calling the cops. It was always me who calmed Austin down and apologized to the neighbors the next day for causing a scene. Millie didn't want the parties to stop and looked forward to them every week. I considered talking to Arlo about it, but since he worked the night shift on Fridays, he had never witnessed these parties. I didn't feel comfortable confronting him. I expressed my concerns about Austin to Millie once. "Don't you think they're a bit much? I don't want the police or an ambulance called. It's bad for Austin," I said firmly. "I'll look out for Austin on Fridays, so why don't you all go to a restaurant outside and drink responsibly?" "I'm not allowed to unwind," Millie snapped. "Living together stresses me out more than you know. Wouldn't you feel the same if you were in my shoes? Plus, going out to drink costs more money than doing it at home. I can't tell them they can't come here. You don't know how I feel," she explained. She was furious and refused to speak to anyone. Then there was one Friday. Austin was drowsy when he got home from school. He said he felt tired. I took his temperature and he had a 100-degree fever. Of all days, it was Friday. "Everyone will be here soon, so why don't you go to your room and rest so you don't bother us?" Millie said dismissively. "Why don't you just cancel for today?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I'll stay with Austin today and make sure he's okay," I offered, though I knew she wouldn't agree. She refused, probably sensing my frustration. "It's fine," she said sharply. "I don't need you hovering. We're not that loud anyway. Why does it always feel like the mom gets blamed when a kid gets sick?" I hadn't meant to imply it was her fault, but I couldn't just let it go. Turning to Austin, I said gently, "If you start feeling worse, come find me in my room, okay? I have some TV shows we can watch tonight. I'm planning to stay up late," I added. "Thanks, Grandma," he replied. "I'll be all right." I felt a little better, but it was still a significant day. I could hear them being very loud from my room. I heard a faint knock on my door and rushed to open it. Austin was standing there. "Can I spend the night with you?" he cried. "I can't sleep because my head hurts. Even when I cover my ears, it's so loud." I rushed him into the room and handed him a drink, which he drank in one gulp, most likely because he was thirsty. His hands felt hot, so I took his temperature, which had risen to 102. For the first time in a long time, I was fuming. But I resisted, because taking care of Austin was more important than telling Millie off. Austin still had a fever the next morning and still looked sick. "Austin looks sick, so I think we should take him to the hospital this morning," I told Millie, because most hospitals only see patients in the morning on Saturdays. But Millie couldn't get out of bed, probably because she had been drinking late the night before. "Oh, don't worry. It'll get better soon. You'll be fine, right, Austin?" she said in a sleepy tone, not even looking up from her bed. Austin responded, but he was clearly not fine. Austin has had asthma since he was a child, so he is prone to asthma attacks when he is sick. As I stood there watching him, fearful that he would have another attack, he started to wheeze, just as I had predicted. "Millie, I think Austin is having an asthma attack. Where is his medicine?" I asked. But Millie was sleeping through it, and wouldn't say anything. "All right, I'm going to take him to the emergency room, okay?" I told her this several times before finally taking Austin to the hospital, where he was able to get treatment. I was so relieved to see Austin feeling better. When Millie woke up that evening, she exploded. "Don't be selfish. He didn't need to go to the hospital. How much did going to the emergency room cost you?" "I can't believe it," she yelled. "I tried to talk to you many times, but you drank too much and couldn't wake up," I retorted. "Can't you just stop drinking when Austin is sick? He was in a lot of pain. Fever is common in kids, and it's already gone away, so it wasn't a big deal," she retorted. "Asthma flare-ups are also common. Don't be a jerk and spoil him just because he's your grandson." I decided to tell Arlo about it, thinking he should know, but his response caught me off guard. "Austin is fine, right? It's just a kid's cold. Millie is already under a lot of stress with the living situation, so please try to be patient with her. You both share a home, so I need you to take a step back," he concluded. Message received. I couldn't argue when he brought up the difficulties of living together. Later that year, just before the holidays, Arlo was injured at work. He required surgery and ended up spending the entire week in the hospital, including Christmas and New Year's Eve. "After a long time, I'm thinking of spending this New Year's holiday at my parents' house," Millie mentioned casually one day. Since I'd heard she was estranged from them, I couldn't help but wonder what had changed. But if a visit to her parents could give her a break, I thought it was a great idea. Austin, surrounded by family who cared for him, would surely enjoy it too. "That's wonderful. You'll take Austin with you, right? I'm sure your parents will be thrilled," I said. "I'll bring him while I'm there. Could you keep an eye on Arlo while I'm gone?" Millie asked. "Of course. Besides checking in on Arlo, I'll be spending New Year's alone this year," I replied. In the past, our family's New Year's traditions included tidying up the house, enjoying comfort food, and having dinner with my eldest daughter Faith and her family, who live nearby. When I mentioned my plans to Faith, she was quick to respond. "If you're going to be alone, why not come to our house this year?" That settled it. I decided to join them. Millie and I both planned to leave the house on New Year's Eve. That day, as I hurried to tidy up the house, I couldn't shake the feeling of being overwhelmed by the need to finish everything on time. Perhaps it was just a sign of getting older, but the task felt heavier, like something I'd been avoiding for far too long. Millie was gone for the morning because she needed to go shopping, so I ended up doing as much of the cleaning as I could on my own. When Millie got back from shopping, she started fidgeting with her watch. "Ruth, what time are you planning to leave? Aren't you done yet?" she asked. When should I leave? I don't have a specific time in mind. I'm not sure I'll finish now after doing so much already. What about you? When are you planning to leave? If you go first, I'll double-check that all the doors are locked and everything's in order," I replied. "We don't have a set time, so we're fine," Millie said. Then, for some reason, my daughter-in-law, who seemed irritated, pushed me outside just as I was taking a break from cleaning the front door because my back was aching. She also threw my stuff outside as if to throw it at me. "Oh my God, how long are you going to keep cleaning, you slowpoke? Go freeze in the yard, you useless old woman," she exclaimed. I was sweating profusely from all the cleaning and was dressed in thin clothes, so when I was thrown out into the yard, I was cold and chilly. It was snowing outside. "Millie, let me in. I haven't changed my clothes. I'm freezing," I pleaded. "You shouldn't be so slow. Why don't you just leave?" she snapped. My coat had been thrown out with my luggage, so I put it over my sweaty t-shirt for the time being. I couldn't get into the house, because both the front door and the kitchen door were locked. I called Millie's name for a while, but she didn't respond, so I gave up. I decided to take a train to Faith's house, because there was nothing else to do. When I made it there, Faith was surprised. "What's wrong? Why are you in such thin clothes? Get inside. You'll catch a cold. Have you seen Hayes? He was worried about you because it was snowing, so he headed to pick you up. He said he texted you," my daughter said with concern in her voice. Only then did I realize I'd left my phone at home. Faith's son, Hayes, is a college student. I felt bad for him because he'd driven all the way there to pick me up, and we missed each other. Faith texted Hayes and told him that I came by train. Then Hayes told us something shocking. "I called you several times, but you never returned my calls. Then I heard a ringtone coming from inside the house. I assumed you were sick, so I went inside on my own. The front door was unlocked for some reason. I found your phone in the living room and figured you weren't there, but then I heard noises coming from upstairs. I went up because I thought maybe it was a robber, Hayes explained. It makes sense that Hayes would think it's a robber since the door was unlocked. Then I noticed Millie and an unknown man hugging in the bedroom, Hayes continued. What? Millie was supposed to head to her parents' home with Austin, I exclaimed, shocked. I was taken aback and froze for a moment, Hayes added. They jumped off the balcony into the yard, wrapped up in a comforter. So I dashed after them and looked around the yard, but I couldn't find them. They escaped. You let them escape, Faith added. I don't think they got hurt because of the bushes and the snow on the ground. I locked the second-floor door and was about to leave when I heard a noise from the next room and saw Austin, her son continued. Austin was small enough to hide behind Hayes. Sorry, my mom told me not to leave my room until after the new year, Austin explained. He was sitting in his room, surrounded by a bunch of sweets, bread, and juice. I brought Austin here because I thought he'd have more fun and be more comfortable here. I made sure to lock the front door. The key is under the flower pot. I'm glad nothing has changed since I was a kid, Hayes reassured us. You did a good job of shutting the door. Mother, I believe it's time to discuss the future with Arlo, Faith concluded. Let's play some games, Austin, suggested the eldest grandson. The two happily exited the room. I couldn't care less about Millie's affair right now. They can talk things out or handle it however they want, but I can't forget how she treated Austin. That evening, we spent time relaxing with Faith and the others since it was already dark. Faith, Hayes, and I went back home the next morning. We chose to leave Austin with Faith's husband. When we got home, we noticed a figure at the front door. It was Millie. She was barefoot and trembling, wrapped in a comforter. Ah, there she is, Hayes began. You locked me out, Millie uttered, shivering in the cold as her teeth chattered. We went in the house so Millie could warm up. At this point, I couldn't even speak to her. Eventually, I broke the ice. Once Millie stopped shivering, I heard from Hayes. Who were you with on the second floor? Hayes asked. What are you talking about? You've got the wrong person. And Hayes, what are you doing breaking into someone's house? Why didn't you press the intercom button? Millie retorted. I noticed a pair of men's shoes near the entrance, but are those Arlo's? Let me ask him, Hayes said. Oh, there was a thief in the house. I was about to start a fight when I was surprised. It was a close call, Millie stammered. That's a big deal. I guess we need to call the cops, Faith said, pulling out her phone. Stop. I see what you're doing. Okay, you caught me, Millie admitted. So who the hell is that man? My daughter demanded. Millie lowered her head and said nothing. Didn't you jump off the balcony with that man? What happened to him? Where is he? Faith pressed. He left a long time ago, Millie replied, her voice trembling. She seemed shocked to have been abandoned by the man she was having an affair with. She had spent the entire night barefoot, wrapped in a comforter, while he simply left and went home. Oh, he left you? How sad, Hayes said, his words sharp and cutting. Millie's face flushed, clearly stung by Hayes's comment. Faith's voice grew firm as she turned to Millie. How could you not take care of Austin? Did you plan to lock him in his room while you were off having fun? I'm not interested in your affair, but I can't forgive you for what you did to Austin. I agree, I added firmly. He's in 4th grade. He can manage being alone just fine. Millie tried to justify herself. I may be his mother, but that doesn't mean I'm obligated to prioritize him in my life. I have things I want to do too. Just because he's my son doesn't give him the right to interfere, she declared, leaving us all in shock. Faith, Hayes, and I were stunned into silence, overwhelmed with anger and disbelief. Arlo was going to be released from the hospital soon, so Austin and I planned to stay at Faith's house until then. The day finally arrived for Arlo to be released. We decided to have the conversation at our house, but I didn't want Austin to be around. Millie may say something hurtful to Austin. I decided to let him have some fun, so I asked Hayes to play with him. Faith, you're here? What's wrong? Arlo asked in surprise as he walked into the house. She told him the facts in a straightforward way. What do you mean, Millie? Is this true? Arlo asked her. Millie hesitated. Well, you were busy with work and I was lonely. Please accept my apology, she muttered. Arlo's face darkened. Millie, did you lock my mother out of the house in the snow? Millie quickly replied, No, that's not it. And what about locking Austin in the next room for a long time while having an affair? My son continued angrily. Arlo, Mom told you about the Friday night parties, didn't she? His sister chimed in. Why didn't you and Millie discuss it? Arlo sighed. I'm not sure how to go about it. The most important thing to remember is to never be afraid to ask for help. I'm tired from work too, and it's been a pain. And I'm sure Millie has a lot to say about living with Mom, he added. Faith retorted bitterly. You two are a perfect match. You both run away from problems and take the easy way out. Do you ever think about others? You two should talk about it and decide what you're going to do together, I said firmly. You're both adults, but you have to think about Austin. I won't let you turn your back on him. They decided to divorce a few days later. Millie was ordered to pay child support and alimony to Arlo, who had custody. Millie admitted everything, and the divorce went smoothly. We never found out who she was cheating with. My daughter-in-law refused to say anything, and Arlo was too busy establishing a new life for himself and Austin to worry about it. But 3 months later, the other man's family found out about the affair, and we learned who he was. To my surprise, the other man was married to one of Millie's mom friends. It was one of the men who came to the Friday night parties sometimes. He and Millie continued their relationship after she and Arlo divorced. The reason she easily agreed to the divorce was because she didn't want anything about the parties to come out. I don't understand how she could keep dating a man who abandoned her in the snow while she was freezing. Millie stayed with him even though she had to pay child support and alimony. The other man's wife demanded alimony, and that she distance herself from him. Then I kept thinking about how the front door was unlocked that day. They were both too focused on the affair and had forgotten to lock the door. Hayes would have rung the intercom if it had been locked. I told Hayes, even if the door was unlocked and you suspected there was a burglar, you shouldn't have gone in because you could have been attacked. I was just worried about Grandma, he defended himself. Besides, those two would have been shocked if the cops had shown up and caught them in the act. He trailed off, looking unsure. Honestly, he can be a bit of a jerk sometimes, but he always tries to make people laugh and treats Austin like his own brother. Millie had a lot of friends, and word of the affair spread quickly to everyone. She left the area, most likely because it was hard for her to live in the same city. Apparently, the group of friends harassed them quite a bit until they moved. They are living a life they can't afford in a new place. They have to spend money on Austin, pay alimony to Arlo, and pay alimony to his ex-wife. Millie is at odds with her parents and is working tirelessly with no help. She called our house once. I'm so sorry, she said. I'm lonely and I'm suffering because I don't have anyone to turn to. Please forgive me. Please help me. It was one thing to want to see or talk to Austin, but it was another thing to want to avoid responsibility for what she had done. The kids of Millie's mom friends bullied Austin for a while because of Millie. Arlo was able to talk to their parents, and the kids fixed things amongst themselves. But I wonder how much it broke Austin's heart for his mother to disappear and then be bullied by his friends. I thought about telling my daughter-in-law how hard it is for Austin, but I doubted she would care. Is that all you want to say? I asked. Don't contact me, I added before hanging up the phone. I moved in with Arlo and Austin. There have been ups and downs, and there will be more downs, but we will work together to overcome them. Arlo also cut back on his work hours and began spending more time with Austin. I'd also like to thank Faith and her family for their help during all this. Faith said many things I should have said. Hayes loves Austin, and the two became like real brothers. I hope he will be raised right in a warm family. I'm glad I get to watch him grow up.